Bienvenidos de nuevo a Oportunidades en Grecia, el podcast en el que tratamos de acercar las oportunidades que, en el marco de la internacionalización, de la exportación, la inversión y la captación de financiación, el país presenta para la empresa española. Welcome again to Oportunidades en Grecia, the podcast where we try to get business opportunities regarding exports and investments in the country, Greece, closer to Spanish companies. Today, in this our 11th episode, we are back again with tourism. And we have a great speaker to do so, Evgenios Vassilikos. Evgenios, good morning. How are you? Thank you for coming.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for joining. Evgenios majored in hotel management in Paris, entered the family business Airotel Group almost 20 years ago, and after rotating in several positions is currently its vice president. In 2021, he co-founded CapitalH, a boutique hotel management company, and since then he is also its CEO. And on top of that, he's member of the board at the Hellenic Hotelier Federation. Let me just throw out there a couple ideas and explain why we get back to tourism in Greece in this podcast. A lot has changed in the last year and a half since we had a conversation with David, owner of Kamaroti, a good friend of ours, on the sector. What has changed? Well, clearly the end of COVID, of course, the war in Ukraine, inflation, and also some positive details on the sector. A record year in terms of number of tourists in the country and income in 2023. A longer season. I was reading today in the newspapers that the season has been enlarged and now goes from March to November, at least for city break and Athens. The increase in short rentals, and a lot more things have been happening. So I thought it was a good idea to get back to tourism and therefore try to find a great expert that could give us some light, that could enlighten us on the sector. So Evgenios, let me ask you first a few questions about the supply side of the business. Here, like in Spain, there's been a great tradition in sand and beach tourism. But I already read that here for quite some time, there is the authorities, the players in the sector trying to push winter cultural, nautical wellness, alternative tourism to that traditional tourism of sand and beach. What's your take on that? How is that changing?
Well, to start with, the main reason people visit Greece will still remain sun and beach and the Acropolis. Unfortunately, we haven't been able yet to get out of this perspective for tourists. What we see is that slowly we're seeing people moving to some other parts of tourism. As you mentioned, cultural is very important for many reasons, especially in Athens. But we also see many sites around Greece that start to develop. And people coming for that. As some of the people who will listen to this might not know, in Greece we have 22 winter stations in mountains, which, yes, you can ski in Greece. Obviously, it's not the same as skiing in the Alps, but people are starting to see that you can have other reasons to come to Greece than just the islands. It is also what we're trying to convey as a message as a Hoteliers Federation, that it's not only about winter, but it's also about where you can go during the summer in Greece. Personally, I love spending my summer in the mountains in Greece because the weather is much nicer and it's not that hot, and obviously there's not that much crowd. So it is a big challenge. We see that the GNTO, which is the Greek National Tourism Organization, who is in charge of promoting Greek tourism abroad, is trying to show these special parts of Greece, also to avoid this congestion of people in some parts of Greece that we see, that make tourism not that nice some periods of the year.
Well, it makes all sense. We're seeing lately a lot of tourism in the city, and I think it makes a lot of sense to try to diversify the offer. When it gets to hotels, we tend to think, we lately say, when it comes to the sector, there is big potential. We used to say there's big potential still for 4-star hotels in alternative regions, which is a little bit what you were mentioning before in your answer. What is the hotel capacity in the country? Where do you see it in the future? What is the regional distribution, islands, cities in the continent? And what about the presence of international brands? What do you think?
It's a very interesting question, because it's starting to change a lot in the last years. So to start with the end of your question, we see a lot of international brands trying to get involved in Greek tourism, new hotels opening under international brands in the past year, and it's quite good, I would say, for the promotion of our tourism. It means that more people want to visit. It means that we're starting to get more interesting from foreign investors also. So that part is very positive. Concerning the distribution of hotels, it's quite not as we expect. In Greece, there are a bit more than 10,000 hotels. The average size of the hotel is about 42 rooms. That is because most of the hotels are family small businesses, and many small hotels. We see the big hotels and the big resorts, or mainly on some islands, the big islands like Rhodes, Crete, Kos. Then we see a lot of big hotels again in the Peloponnese and in Chalkidiki, in the north of Greece. Other than these regions, most of the hotels are going to be small and smaller hotels around 100 rooms. Even on the islands like Mykonos and Santorini, especially Santorini, we see a lot of hotels, but there are 5, 10, 20 rooms. So there's a big diversity, and while we would expect to see many big resorts, there are not that many, as I said. And then we have quite a lot of hotels that are placed in the mountains of Greece, as I mentioned before, either close to Athens or further north, because we have quite a few places of high altitude around Greece, even on the islands.
Well, I take a few ideas that are quite interesting and maybe a bit not unexpected, but a bit different of what could be thought beforehand. The presence of international brands, which is maybe not enough known outside the country. I was reading today that Waldorf Astoria is going to take over a project down by the sea here in the city, and all the big brands are here, of course, Hyatt, you name it, Intercontinental, and also very interesting the structure of of most of the sector, with a lot of family-owned hotels and so on and so forth. I wanted to ask you as well about the role of platforms and tour operators, which I see are quite present in the market. And what's the future you foresee for? I mean, are the tour operators as big players as we think beforehand, or not as much? And what about the platforms?
Well, there we have to see two different parts of tourism. The resort hotels are very dependent on tour operators, on major tour operators, and slowly going also to the OTAs and all the platforms for reservations, and we see a totally different picture when we go to smaller hotels, especially city hotels. There we try not to be so dependent on tour operators, and to diversify the markets that we're trying to reach. So on the islands, you see quite a big presence of tour operators, but other than the islands, you see mostly the presence of platforms, as we know that everybody is booking through the internet mostly these days. So yeah, that would be the difference between these two key players in the market.
Well, I think this is thanks for the detail. I think this is a common phenomena that is happening a little bit everywhere in the countries that offer tourism, as we both do, Greece and Spain and Greece. Let me ask you also for about the demand side. We mentioned just before that this year will set, I think, a new record in terms of number of tourists in the country, as well as in terms of income from tourism in the country. Where are these tourists coming from mainly, and what's happening lately with the average ticket? Is it going up? Is it going down?
Yes, we see that 2023 will probably break the record of incoming tourism, which, as a federation of hoteliers, and personally, wouldn't say I'm totally agreeing with this record. Not it happening, it's going to happen, but where we want to go. So do we want to break records, number records of most tourists coming, or do we want to see, as you mentioned, the ticket growing and maybe the numbers stabilizing? Because we have to see what the possibilities of Greece are also. To return to your question, we see the ticket of tourists growing. We do have to take into account that prices are inflated, and we've had a big growth in the cost of running the hotels in the past year and a half, and obviously, like the whole world, after having our businesses closed for 2 years. So we do see the ticket growing, but it has an asterisk, so we have to see why it's growing and how it's growing. Mainly, tourists are coming from the United States. There were a lot of flights this year and the last year direct to Athens airport, so that helped a lot. And then it's very diversified within Europe, mostly.
I think you mentioned something that is very important, and that takes us to the next question that I want to ask you. You talk about new flights from the United States. I think there's been a role played by the administration regarding that, more or less. What do you think is the role of the strategic tourism plan 2130 and its effects on tourism? And do you see any strengths and or weaknesses in the sector that should be worked on. And I'm thinking there in both ways, strengths and weaknesses. I'm thinking about transport infrastructure, health infrastructure, security, and labor market, which was something that was mentioned in the previous podcast by David, the owner of Camarote in Sivnos. He mentioned that it was not easy to find the right people for the right positions in the hotel. Is that still the reality of the sector?
It is very, very real. This year we saw hoteliers not opening parts of their hotels because they couldn't find the staff to run it. Unfortunately, on this point, what I have to say is that even though tourism in Greece is about 25% of the GDP, it's not seen as so important. And what I mean is that we've put demands on many things, and we've rang the bell that something needs to be done about many things, and for many years. And things were not going into that direction. And for example, the transport infrastructure that you mentioned. You live in Athens, you see the traffic every day, you see that during the summer it's even worse, and you're thinking why? So obviously it's because you have a congestion of people coming and you need to do something about that. There are even worse examples. If you go to Mykonos in July, it's better to swim around the island than to go by car somewhere. So there has been a lot of investments, private investments in hotels, in villas, but there hasn't been the investment needed in the infrastructures. The infrastructures, even the smallest and for example, the Acropolis. This year we had a huge problem, people waiting 4 hours to be able to visit the Acropolis, and waiting in the sun in 40 degrees weather. And that's also what we need to think about. How many people can visit the Acropolis every day? What will be the infrastructure about it? What will we do so that people leave happily from their visit to the Acropolis? Some people have it as a life travel. So I think we need to do a lot more and to organize to see where we want to be, not in 2024 or in 2025, but where we want to be in 2030, 2035, and what we want as a country for tourism.
I think I see where you're going, where you were mentioning the evolution of the ticket, the evolution of the numbers this year, and the planning in the short, medium, and long run. So a bigger ticket, but in the long run, making it sustainable, which makes me go a little bit farther. I wanted to ask you very briefly, because some of those that are listening might be thinking about investing in the country, the different alternatives from the people from the sector to come over to Greece. One of them might be investing, and I wanted to ask you how will the investment grade have an effect on asset prices? How do you see the market? Most probably depends on the place, the city, the region, islands, continent. But how do you see that? How do you see the pricing of the assets?
Pricing of the assets have grown a lot in the past years. We've seen hotels changing hands at prices that we wouldn't think about a few years ago. At this point, I need to remind you that Greece has been through the crisis from 2008 until 2016, and it was quite harder for Greece to get out of this crisis, especially Athens. We all remember, unfortunately, the images of Athens in fire. So we weren't expecting this to grow this way. We see a lot of hotels changing hands, a lot of investments from funds, from foreigners, from Greek people living abroad and thinking they invest back in country. We see a growth. Again, it's going to need to have a strategy if we do not want to tumble again. I think that even for this kind of investments, there needs to be a strategy, and we see the good parts of them. I use an example quite often. The Four Seasons hotel down in Glyfada, Glyfada, Vouliarmeni, sorry, down in Vouliarmeni. It started a few years ago. Its lowest price was about 500 euros a night for a room that does not have a sea view. This year, the same room was 2,000 euros at least. And this obviously helps the hotels around grow with them. I mean, there is a hotel next to Four Seasons who used to sell rooms about 200 euros, 250 at the best. Now it sells at 1,000 euros. And it's not, the same standards, and yet it's selling because it's next to a big investment. So this is very helpful, but again, it's private investments, and then you have to see what's going on around and what the infrastructure helps for these I want to say to give an excuse for this kind of prices. I mean
I see what you say. So I would take that from your answer. Asset prices, of course, have gone up since the crisis, which I would say in the real estate changed trends around 2017, 2018 or something like that, and definitely there is a ton of FDI, foreign direct investment, coming into the country. I wanted to ask you also, to finish, a little bit about other opportunities, things that are always in the mind of investors or companies that would like to come over and cooperate with local companies. Sustainable tourism and digitalization. What is the future or the present of those two things in the market now?
Sustainability has been a big issue in the past years for hoteliers. We see most hotels trying a lot to be more sustainable through different EU programs and EU funds. There is a possibility for a lot of hotels to go towards that way. It's getting very important for many companies coming to Greece as clients of the hotels. They're looking for that. And concerning the digitalization, unfortunately, the hotel business is not very digitalized.
But it could be digitalized, or does it need?
It could be, and it needs to be, obviously, without losing the person-to-person interest, and so I think that it's a reason why we've stayed behind in that part of the digitalization, because we want to to keep the Greek hospitality alive, and maybe we're a bit afraid of it. But it definitely needs to go forward in a way.
So I take it there is room for improvement like everywhere else regarding sustainability and digitalization. I take a lot of ideas from the conversation that we had up to this point. We confirmed, as we all expected, we thought that there is an alternative to the classic sand and beach tourism that is the major tourism in many countries in the Mediterranean, also of course in Spain. And there is a tone of offer when it comes to cultural, winter, mountain, which is quite an unknown outside the country probably, and
correct,
which I have enjoyed personally because I live in the country for a long time. There is a huge diversity in when it comes to the kind of hotels that are in the business in the country. You can see big hotels in the main islands, in the big islands, and then family-run hotels elsewhere. The tour operators, they do have their role, but mainly in the big islands where the big hotels are. A record year 2023, but I would say nice tickets, but with the idea of rationalizing in the future what's happening so that can keep on that trend in the long run. With regards to maybe strengths and weaknesses, maybe there is a certain labor shortage, and that could be dealt with in the future. And then prices of assets moving up, but still a lot of movement between companies, so people buying and selling, and big FDI. I think those are the main takes that I could bring to the table. You mentioned also, of course, sustainability as a factor to invest in the future, and the RRF Greece 2.0 as a funding possibility for that. Thank you very much, Evgenios. Thanks a lot for coming and joining.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Y nosotros nos vemos de nuevo pronto en Oportunidades en Grecia. Aún queda mucho por conocer, hay muchas oportunidades en el proceso de privatizaciones, saber sobre el papel de los servicers en el sistema financiero griego, alternativas para la implementación en el país, digitalización. Hasta pronto.